This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. This hour, we're looking at how museums can act as places of discovery, dialogue, and healing. For a long time, these spaces have showcased history and culture, but today, they're taking things a step further, engaging with critical, often complex issues important to the communities they serve. Where We Live, Palestine Museum US is doing just that. In April 2018, it became the very first museum in the Americas dedicated to Palestinian art and culture. It's located in Woodbridge, Connecticut, on the Litchfield Turnpike. My colleague Meg Dalton recently spent an afternoon at the museum with its founder and executive director, Faisal Saleh.
On the outside, Palestine Museum US looks like any other nondescript office building. But once inside, it's a whole different story. There are a series of galleries, 6,500 square feet total, filled with all kinds of artwork. Photographs, paintings, colorful embroidery, sculptures, and more.
As a museum, we're different than any of the other museums. So the other museums usually have different departments or different sections. Like this will be sometimes chronologically, this is like the Middle Ages, this is whatever. And we're different because we're catering to a different audience and we're taking care of different group of artists. And we're trying to create a presence for Palestine where there was none before.
Faisal Saleh is the museum's founder and executive director.
Our mission is to tell the Palestinian story through the arts, basically. So we're trying as much as we can to use art as a medium to communicate to people because we want people to come here and see the work of the Palestinians and to see that we are human and we need to be treated like humans.
About 2,000 to 3,000 people visit the museum annually. But there's been an uptick in interest in recent weeks, since the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel and Israel's subsequent bombardment of Gaza.
People hear about Gaza, they want to know more. A lot of people came to the museum to show their support and sympathy. I get a lot of calls from people and email, and they says, we're sorry about what's going on, and I hope you're okay, and you have relatives there and stuff, and or do you have friends? And like some of my tenants in the building here, we have a couple of tenants, they also, stopped me and, they expressed their concern and their sympathy and things like that.
Over the past few weeks, the museum has been hosting in-person and virtual events to foster dialogue and raise awareness about the current conflict and history behind it. For Faisal and most Palestinians, what's happening right now didn't start a few weeks ago. It started 75 years ago, during what's known as the Nakba, or catastrophe in Arabic, when an estimated 750,000 Palestinians were forced from their homes after the creation of Israel. Faisal walks toward a table full of art prints and points to one reminiscent of Vermeer's Girl with a Pearl Earring.
The only difference is it's not a pearl earring, it's a key earring. And the key is a Palestinian symbol. It's the symbol of return. It's the symbol of the right of return. When Palestinians were driven out of their homes in 1948, they were told this is going to be temporary, just go out for like a couple of weeks or a month or so, and then the politicians were going to fix the problem. Everybody will go back. So they locked up their houses and took the keys with them. And it's been over 75 years now, and none of them were allowed to go back. And some of them still have the keys, believe it or not, that they locked their houses with 75 years ago. So the key has become a symbol of the right of return, or people are clinging to their right to return to their homes where they were driven from.
Today, there are almost 6 million Palestinian refugees, according to the UN. Faisal says that context and history are important, and it's something the museum spotlights through its art. He shows me a wall of historic black and white photographs, taken between 1900 and 1948.
What these photos do is they confirm that there were Palestinians living in Palestine, that it was a vibrant society. They had, their own, like that was a women's association that would meet once a month. There was graduation of different schools, some artisans, some commerce, political leaders.
The Nakba remains a collective trauma for Palestinians like Faisal. This history is deeply personal.
Well, I was in the West Bank. I grew up in the West Bank. I was born in a town called El Bira, which is a twin city with Ramallah. They're next to each other. My family was expelled from our village, which is near Jaffa, about 5 kilometers east of Jaffa. And in 1948, they came to that area in the West Bank, and I was born 3 years later in 1951. And my parents had 10 children at the time, and they were all living in one room. So there were like 13 people in one room that they rented. My father didn't want us to live in a refugee camp because the conditions were really very poor. So we grew up there, and it was really a difficult life. We had to pull ourselves from our bootstraps, like they say in English.
In 1969, Faisal came to the U.S. to attend a Quaker high school in Pennsylvania. He then studied at Oberlin College and got his MBA from UConn. He spent decades in business before retiring to focus on the museum full-time. While he has no formal art background, he's been a photographer since he was 10 years old.
I like photography because, a photo is a unique instant in time and space that would only happen once, and it cannot be duplicated. And that just is a very sobering idea. It's something that you can think about for a long time. If you don't take that shot, you missed it.
Faisal Saleh is the founder and executive director of Palestine Museum US in Woodbridge, Connecticut. I'm Meg Dalton. More from our recent visit to the museum after a short break. How do you think museums act as places of discovery, dialogue, and healing? Let us know on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live.
A child's success is often tied to achievement in school, but many factors impact a young person's trajectory. On November 15th at 7 p.m., Connecticut Public and the Connecticut Black and Brown Student Union launch a series of conversations about serving the whole child. Join me, Lucy Nalpathanchel, in New Haven at Next Haven for a panel discussion with young people and advocates. Register at ctpublic.org/education.
This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Meg Dalton. This hour, we're looking at how museums are engaging with critical, often complex issues important to the communities they serve. I recently spent an afternoon at Palestine Museum US with its founder and executive director, Faisal Saleh. Based in Woodbridge, Palestine Museum US became the very first museum in the Americas dedicated to Palestinian art and culture in 2018. The museum's website says very clearly it will espouse a non-religious and non-political posture. But it's almost impossible to wade into the historical conflict at this moment without getting political.
We are not a political organization where we have a platform and lobby and do things in that. And what we're here is to preserve culture and to promote art and celebrate art and maintain Palestinian identity and tell the story of the Palestinians. That's what our role is, and that is not political. Yes, it may have some political tones to it, and you cannot totally be isolated from political things because the artists are going to paint and do whatever comes to their mind, and sometimes that looks political, sometimes it doesn't. I mean, look at the artwork here. There's hardly any of it that says politics. Right? I mean, if you see this somewhere, you'll be hard-pressed to know that this is done by a Palestinian, right?
Some of the art speaks directly to the historic and ongoing conflicts between Palestine and Israel. Faisal shows me a mural of American activist Rachel Corrie. In 2003, Corrie was killed by an Israeli bulldozer. She had been nonviolently protesting the demolition of a Palestinian family's home in Gaza. Israel maintains her death was an accident. Nearby, a bridge made from keffiyehs fills the room. A keffiyeh is a black and white traditional Palestinian scarf.
This particular thing here is an art installation made of 47 keffiyehs knotted together. It's supposed to symbolize the unity, the Palestinian unity, where you have 47 different groups of political, military, whatever, but yet they can be tied together and form one thing, which is a bridge here. Now, the artist is a young, recent graduate from Columbia with an art major. He called this neither here nor there or anywhere. We call it the keffiyeh bridge. Makes more sense to us.
And what's the importance of the keffiyeh?
The keffiyeh is a traditional headdress that Palestinians wore traditionally going back 100 years. And it comes in different colors, but the black and white was what a lot of the Palestinians wore. In the summer, many people wore just a plain white keffiyeh made out of very, very thin fabric because it's hot in the summer there. And the white keffiyeh reflects the heat, so it keeps you cool when you wear it. But it has become a symbol of another Palestinian symbol,
Faisal guides me to yet another room. There are walls of drawings made by children. Most of them are done in crayon, some in pen or watercolor. The museum has about 200 of these drawings total, with a few dozen on display. Can you describe one of these for me? You can pick whichever one you would like.
All right, so a lot of them have similar things. So you see Israeli tanks. You see people raising their hands. You see children crying. You see toys on the ground. You see trees crying. You see Palestinian fighters launching missiles. And you see trees and buildings on fire. You see planes dropping bombs or whatever. You see, Israeli gunships, Cobra helicopters, basically, not Cobra, Apache helicopters, shooting missiles down and firing, at people. Trees knocked down. You see Israeli bulldozers bulldozing things in their way, tanks shooting, the mosque being hit and burning buildings, people dead on the ground, people resisting. There's some people firing anti-tank missiles on the tanks.
Do you know the ages of kids?
Yeah. A lot of them have the info on the back. So, let me see. This one does not seem to have the age. This is pen and crayon, it said, and the size. Let me see. But they usually run from 6 to 16 in the age.
About half of the 2.3 million people living in the Strip are below age 18, according to the UN. Most Gazan children have lived through multiple wars. Faisal says these drawings were done in 2008, following an Israeli assault on Gaza. Israel was responding to rocket fire from Gaza. That led to a ground war against Hamas, and ultimately 1,200 Palestinians and 13 Israelis were killed.
And a lot of the children at the time, all of them almost, were traumatized. They say in many places, they call it PTSD. But in Gaza, they omit the P because it's constant. It's not post because there's no time to have a post. So part of therapy for the children, that some NGO asked children to, in a group, to paint what they saw. And they collected 200 of these paintings. We have all of them. We're showing 50. The children had all kinds of stuff. I mean, the children in Gaza are no ordinary children. They're the people that have been de-childed. The term de-childing is a new term. It's where you have people who are 4 years old that experience life like a 20-year-old. And they can do things and talk things that you would never imagine what they're saying,
Other artworks in the museum are more subtle and speak to the broader human experience, including some post-impressionist and abstract paintings.
Well, art speaks to the heart. Politics speak to the mind. So when somebody comes and looking at a piece of art, it's just a whole different. First of all, you don't need to translate anything because it's a universal language of the art. And people just fall in love with art. They see a piece of art, it talks to them. I don't know how to describe it, but it does something for them.
Faisal says the local community has welcomed the museum. Once in a while, he gets a letter from someone saying Palestine doesn't exist. But the response has been mostly positive, including from some in the Jewish community. Since the museum opened, it's partnered with 2 Jewish organizations in Connecticut, the New Haven chapter of Jewish Voice for Peace and Mending Minyan.
We have cordial relations with members of the Jewish community. In fact, we have one Jewish group that uses the museum for their Rosh Hashanah religious celebration and the Yom Kippur event. We've had like 60, 70 people each time. And that shows that we Palestinians have no issue with Judaism. Our issue is not with the Jewish faith. We have respect for the Jewish faith like we respect the Christian and Muslim faith.
Faisal estimates that 40% of museum visitors are Palestinian. The other 60% are not.
We have 2 audiences, the Palestinians and the non-Palestinians. For the Palestinians, it's a question of identity. It's a question of educating the young generation about Palestine because they heard their parents and grandparents telling them these stories. Now they can come and see some of it. And it kind of closes the circle for them. And it's just when you are on the receiving end of all kinds of things that are all negative and things, it's very heartwarming to come in a place where all that is not there.
The museum may be based in Connecticut, but its reach is global. At a recent open house, 100 people attended in person and another 200 people were on Zoom. The museum's Instagram account now has close to 40,000 followers. In the future, Faisal hopes to create branches of the museum in major cities across the U.S. Faisal thinks museums like his can be places to spotlight artists whose works and voices have been historically overlooked. He hopes everyone who visits leaves a different person.
They need to be places where people that don't have a voice can go and let people hear them.
That was Faisal Saleh, the founder of Palestine Museum US. To learn more about the museum, visit palestinemuseum.us. I'm Meg Dalton. Today's show, produced by Katie Pellico and Katie Tolarski. Our technical producer is Kat Pastor. Download Where We Live anytime on your favorite podcast app. Thank you so much for listening.